Hi, so I'm going to talk about the two parts of my research. The first part I'll talk about the scientific research and the second part the artistic. So 12 months ago I was in the International Laboratory of Plant Neurobiology in Italy, in LINF as it's called. They have all sorts of different ways of reading signals in plants, from very simple to very complicated. There's a few examples. The one I ended up choosing was reading action potentials, which are electrical signals in plants which I convert into sound. So this is the basic setup. You have electrodes in the plant going into a high impedance device which stops the measuring equipment affecting the signals, and that goes into a data acquisition device. Because I wanted to do lots of different channels, and this only had 2 channels, we decided to build our own impedance devices in Italy with an engineer called Matteo. So we built this device, which cost less than €10 to build, but it's actually better than some of the higher end ones. So I spent quite a bit of time making those, which was one of the projects I did while I was out there. This is what the basic setup looked like. You have a plant with the electrodes and the stimulus. That wasn't me, by the way. And I generally do this outside in forests or in exhibitions, but in the natural world there's less interference from electrical noise. Basically what I'm reading is called an action potential. Here's an example in a Venus flytrap. So Venus flytrap has 2 hairs. When both are touched, it knows that it's likely there's an insect walking, and it closes. And this closing behaviour is caused by an electrical signal. And as you can see, when you touch both hairs there, you have an electrical signal happening up in the top right-hand corner. Another thing I'm interested in, which I was learning about over there, is the mycorrhizal network, which is a network of fungus and tree roots under the ground, which connect to, and they exchange information, nutrients, that sort of thing. If an insect's eating one part of the network, the rest of the network might be informed. This is a map of the mycorrhizal network. These are big trees, these are small trees. You can see the big trees have more connections than the small trees. So that's something I'm interested in and have been studying, is how signals traverse this network. Is it electrical, is it chemical? And obviously I'm more interested in the electrical signals. Now we know plants can communicate underneath the roots. This is a plant that when an insect starts eating the leaf, it puts out a chemical in the air and basically attracts carnivorous wasps which eat those insects. So, but what they found out is if they put aphids on one plant, the other plant next to it also started putting out this chemical into the air. Now, how do they know this signal was propagated through the roots? Well, they put plastic bags over the plants. That way they knew that it was only a signal in the roots. And they still found that all the other plants connected by the mycorrhizal network put out the chemical, even though they didn't have the insects on them. And ones that weren't connected did not. So that's why I'm interested in turning these sort of processes into sound. The technology is strangely compatible. Creatively, I'm very interested in spatial audio, and this is, as you probably all know, a multi-channel sound card, and this is an 8-channel data acquisition device. So you can have 8 signals from plants, creating 8 different sounds, and you can have those sounds coming from where the signals are happening in the network, in the forest. It's a very compatible technology, which helps. Now the artistic side. I don't just want to sonify data. I don't think that's a particularly creative or artistic thing to do. And I don't want all the artwork I make to be completely subservient to the data that's being produced by the signals in the plants. So I'd rather have signals creating interesting sounds in the sound installations, but I'd like to build sort of sound art around those sounds as well, so that they're on an equal footing as science and art. And I'm trying really hard to avoid pseudoscience. So some artists, like this lady, demonstrates that by touching the plant there appears to be a response in the plant. But actually what's really happening is you're earthing the electrical field of your own body. It's not a response in the plant. So I'm trying to make sure I keep very strict on the scientific side, otherwise there's not really much point to making these processes audible. The first sound installation I did based on this, what I learnt in Italy, was Invisible Forest in August last year at a festival in Northern Ireland. So we rigged up a forest with lots of speakers, and here you can see the speaker setup I had was basically these are all speakers hidden in the trees, and it created an immersive environment for people. That was the artistic side of things. And then in the middle there was 4 trees with data acquisition electrodes in the 4 trees, and if there was a signal that fed back to the DAC, went into the computer, and then sound speakers next to the trees made a sound. And the sounds I chose were varying. Sometimes the trees played a melody together, sometimes different sounds were used. This led to me being approached by a journal, Plastices Science and Arts, who asked me to publish a paper on the installation, which I did, along with a guide for artists who wanted to work with plant electrophysiology. So I basically wrote 2 parts. One was the technical side, explaining how to rig plants up, and the other one was the artistic side. So that was my first paper, published a couple of months ago in a peer-reviewed journal. Then now to Brazil. Last month I was in Brazil with Guto Nobrega, who also works in a very similar field. He actually reads resistance on the surface of leaves, which I guess changes according to moisture. So I gave a talk at his university to his students in his laboratory, Nano. That was the publicity for that. And then we went out to the woods, and we had both of our equipment setups running alongside together. That's Guto Leudhar's equipment. And we took notes and we exchanged research, and it was a very productive time. We were quite candid with each other, you know, we managed to sort of help each other improve technically quite a lot. Now, signal conditioning, there's a lot of electrical interference. So I've made this patch from Max MSP. So as you can see here, this is the original signal, and this is the filtered signal. So if I turn the filter down, it removes electrical noise. So that's something I've been working on recently, is really reading the signals properly and not just reading artifacts, because the main idea is to avoid artifacts. I've also been recording 3D soundscapes in the forest, so I've put a lot of different microphones over a large area of the forest, and then speakers in the same place reproduce a 3D soundscape. So here is the exhibition I'm working on at the moment, which is reading electrical signals in a miniature soundscape, and then I'm getting that big area of sound and reducing it down to this miniature world, and using that as a framework which the sounds from the signals are echoing in. And it just so happens that here in Bolivia, where I'm doing the exhibition, is also the Congreso Nacional de Ecology, the National Congress of Ecology, so I'm going to be doing a talk on the television about the installation in a couple of days, and this opens in 3 days, and it's part of the Clandestino Festival of Art and Creativity here in Bolivia. The sound installation, this is a top view. That's the miniature forest with a miniature sound installation, and then there's 4 larger speakers around the room, so there's interaction between the miniature and the larger sound installation. So spatially it's quite interesting. This is in production at the moment, so that's what it's, that's the miniature forest there. This is a max patch also that I'm designing, so that those are all signals in plants, so I'm going to try and create a kind of web of sound across the forest, and when there's a signal it will change slightly the sound in the area where the signal is, using granular synthesis and all sorts of different techniques. So maybe the sound will rush towards the point in the network to where the signal is and then come back out again. So I'm playing around a lot with sounds and different ways of converting these signals into sounds. I'm trying with different scales, like harmonics of phi, using standing waves by getting frequencies that are proportionate to the diameter of the speaker array, working on time stretching the signals, and this is another patch for doing that sort of thing. Scientifically, in the forest here in the tropics, I want to find out which plants have more electrical activity than the others for use in sound installations in the future. There's trees here where the roots connect above the ground, so I can test to see if electrical signals are travelling along them, and also recording the 3D environments of various species of plants, which behave more naturally, obviously, in the wild than the lab. So, and this is the poster for the festival that I'm doing at the moment with the exhibition. I'm also teaching a bit about spatial audio here, and again doing some talks on electrophysiology, plants and art. And I've got a few more events coming up soon, so thank you.